This is our Methods for Scientific Inquiry Presentation Group project. Our topic is on experimental research by Nana Butterfield and Erica Burgess. An experimental research adheres to a scientific research design. It always includes a hypothesis, a variable or variables that can be manipulated by the researcher, and other variables that are measured, calculated, analyzed, and compared. Data is collected and analyzed to identify potential causation between the variables. There are a few types of experimental research designs. In a pre-experimental research design, an intervention is applied to a group, and the group is observed to determine if the intervention or treatment causes a change in outcome. This form of experimental research is more than observation because an intervention is applied. A true experimental research design is one of the most reliable and accurate forms of experimental research. It measures cause and effect relationships between variables. It always involves randomization of sample exposure to the variables, and typically control groups don't receive an intervention and the experimental groups do receive an intervention. In a quasi-experimental research design, it's similar to true experimental research design, where it measures causal relationships between independent and dependent variables, but in contrast, the participants are not randomly assigned to conditions. So experimental research is a quantitative approach. It is focused on measuring facts. It assumes a fixed and measurable reality in an objective mode. Data is collected through measuring things, and it's analyzed through numerical comparisons and statistical analysis. Group and sample sizes must be larger in order to analyze data statistically rather than anecdotally. So there are several steps to using an experimental approach. First is identifying a problem in the nursing field that needs to be addressed, which leads to developing a research question. And then you'll want to conduct a literature review, so combing through existing literature related to the topic to support your hypothesis. And then developing a hypothesis, you'll write a hypothesis that can be supported or made null. It should state the problem, involve an if-then statement, and define the variables. So we have an independent variable, which is the one to be manipulated, and the dependent variable is the one to be affected. Next is determining measures to be used, which includes instruments, tools, tasks, or questionnaires used to yield the data. We'll want to then identify potential extraneous or intervening variables. And these are variables that are not directly related to the research question, but may still affect the data. Next is the design of the experiment. This is where you'll define conditions for how, when, and where interventions will be placed on participants and how data will be conducted. And then you'll also identify how data will be collected and analyzed. Next is recruiting the participants. So developing a plan to recruit and screen participants as appropriate for the study with attention to potential extraneous variables. Next is conducting the study as planned, where you'll implement measures to collect data from participants and organize data to be analyzed. So analyzing the collected data, you'll apply the chosen method of statistical analysis to the raw data to determine significant relationships and causation between variables. And then the last step is to prepare a research report. So you'll construct a report that includes an introduction to support the need for the research, a method section that details materials, approach, design, variables, and specifics of data collection and analysis, a results section to report direct results, and a discussion section that includes interpretation of the result with implications and future endeavors. So here's an example of an experimental research study. This was called Effective Healing Meditation on Stress and Eating Behavior in Overweight and Obese Women, and this was a randomized clinical trial. The aim was to assess the effect of meditation on eating habits and stress of overweight and obese women who were undergoing a standard weight loss treatment. The sample was 55 overweight or obese Brazilian women. The participants were randomly placed into two groups. The first group was the meditation group, and they attended 8 weekly 1-hour meetings for meditation practice. And the control group, they had like their regular monthly 2-hour meetings without meditation. The study showed that there were significant decreases in binge eating, stress, and emotional eating in the meditation groups when compared to the control groups. So how is this experimental research? First, there's a research problem, and it is a measurable problem via correlation or relationship. And the question is, does meditation affect stress and eating habits in overweight women? There's a hypothesis present, which is incorporating a meditation program will reduce stress and improve eating habits in overweight women. And then next, there are independent variables and dependent variables present. The independent variable is the meditation program, which is also considered the intervention. And then the dependent variables are stress and eating behaviors. So in this study, there were specific experimental design methods present. First of all, the sample was randomly assigned to each group. Next, there were specific instruments used for measurement and data collection. They used perceived stress scale, the Dutch eating behavior questionnaire, and the binge eating scale, and these were used to collect the numerical data. Next, statistical analysis was performed in the study, and the result data could be analyzed for comparison or trends. So they found that women in the meditation group, the median reported stress scores were 16.5 points lower, and the median reported emotional eating scores were 11.5 points lower when compared to the control group. So there are a couple of challenges and limitations in experimental research designs, but I just listed a few here. So one challenge is if the sample sizes are too small or restricted to one gender, like in the previous study shown. Results are limited to that population only and can't be generalized. So another study would have to be repeated for another population. Also, researchers are at risk for bias when designing the research, so they have to be careful there. And also, internal validity, as Gray and Grove define it, as an assessment of the degree to which the measured relationships among variables are truly due to their interaction and the degree to which other intrusive variables might have accounted for the measured value. So validity, there can be a couple of threats to validity, so we just have to look out for that. An example would be safety of hospital parking areas at 9 a.m. versus the safety at midnight. And this is an example by Gray and Grove as well. And that's it. Thank you.